EJ is too. Brazil. It's always cool how global of an audience you get for these. Can you guys quickly confirm that you can see and hear me? That would be fantastic. Perfect. Cool. We're seeing people trickle in. I'll give them another few minutes, but perfect. I love that everyone's responding. Great engagement. Um, but I'll be actually filling in for EJ today. My name's Tony, first off. I work on lifecycle and product marketing here. I think that's actually a wonderful sort of fit for the theme of the presentation because automation is a fundamental part of lifecycle marketing. It's a great way to engage with users over time as they progress through their life cycle as a subscriber. So worked out fortuitously that this is something I do every day. So I'd be happy to have some slides prepared, but I'm also happy to take questions at the end too. I'm gonna queue things up as we give folks another minute or two to enter. I'm just gonna share my entire screen here. Cool, and that is the infinity mirror, but this is the presentation I want to share. I'm going to start walking through things. I'm gonna check into the chat. Cool. All right, so this should work just fine. I have a few Easter eggs I want to show you guys as this presentation goes on. But in a nutshell, this is going to be about automating your growth and scaling your newsletter with automations. Again, for those who are just joining, my name is Tony. I work on lifecycle and product marketing here. That includes both the way to think about growth here is we have an acquisition team. Brian, who works on acquisition, he's in charge of getting us in front of new audiences, some of our paid campaigns, all of those different touch points that get users into the ecosystem. And then I work on the lifecycle side of things. So everything after that first touch point, I'm in charge of walking users through from that initial sign up all the way through to their free trial and ultimately their upgrade. And then even after their upgrade, I work on making sure they're getting the most value out of the product, uh, using the features that would be most useful for their specific business use case. And that's sort of how the team works here. So automation is right up my alley. A loose agenda for the event. Because it's just me today, I will be flipping into the chat every now and then. So when I leave this screen, I'm sorry about that. You might get that annoying multiple screen share for a little bit, but not much I can do there. The agenda, though, is we're going to start with a high level discussion about automation, where it's valuable, how you can start employing it. We'll get more in depth on the execution side of things, so the actual setup of your drip campaigns. We'll talk about nurturing subscribers with automation, really ties into that previous bullet. Then how you can use automation as you grow, as you scale. And I'll have some examples with publications in the Beehive ecosystem that are doing really well at this. And then we'll talk about how you can automate your newsletter more fully. We'll have a few different case studies to walk through there. And then I'll save some time for Q&A at the end. From a housekeeping perspective, I'm going to, no need to use this link actually. Feel free to just drop questions in the chat. Towards the end of the conversation, I'll jump back in and we can get through them in real time. I'm going to jump into the chat now to make sure there aren't any technical issues and that this sounds good to everyone. Um, yeah, just double check the audio before the event, so that should all be fine there. Oh, for the folks asking if there's going to be a recap at the end of the presentation, yes, there will be. We'll send that out in a few days after the event. And Inspire Uplift, I would recommend setting a through Stripe Express. I don't think Stripe is actually supported in India. That's a more specific use case, but I'd recommend reaching out to one of our support team members there. But let's jump into the presentation. So laying the groundwork, I know if you've been to these presentations before, EJ is always on top of this. I think this is key to success. A lot of people jump into automation and think that they can automate their entire newsletter growth, content creation, the entire funnel. But before that happens, there has to be a core level of audience understanding. So make sure that you know who you're writing for, what they're expecting, and be in their inbox consistently. We recommend publishing at least once a week, um, once a week or once every other week, but really no less than once every other week. And really knowing your niche, I think this is all those tips, advice that we're going to share in this presentation are predicated on having a really dialed in understanding on who your niche is, what they need, and ensuring that the content is valuable to that niche. Because at the end of the day, if the content isn't valuable, and we can talk about different ways to get a sense of how your audience feels about your content, if the content isn't valuable, all of these tips aren't going to have the impact that we want them to have. So let's start there. But the first slide here is about onboarding specifically, and I can share a lot of direct context here because if you're in this presentation, you've probably received some of our early onboarding and welcome emails, and those have been written, designed, drafted by yours truly. And so a lot I can share there about how we set those up, how we test them, and key metrics we look for, and how we approach them, right? So I'm not going to jump into that campaign specifically, but a lot of this is very product dependent. The way we've approached onboarding is we looked at some analytics about our core platform. We looked at what are the signals that someone is getting the most value and they're most likely to upgrade onto one of our paid plans. So that's the goal for us as a business, right? We want users taking full advantage of all of our features on one of our paid plans. And so for me, we use a journey mapping tool called Full Story here. Google Analytics has a similar functionality. Like there's different ways to do this, but what we found was that there are certain features that we can over-index against, right? Using advanced features in the text editor. Are you embedding audio and video, and are you taking full using some of the AI tools there? Are you taking full advantage of the robust text editor? Are you exploring our monetization features? Have you looked at the ad network? Have you considered using boosts? That's also a positive indicator there. There's things like, have you set up custom fields? Are you getting more in the weeds with analytics and data? That's another positive indicator that someone might upgrade in the future. And so the first step of this project was figuring out what are the highest intent signals that we can gather from user behavior to set up this series. And so that was step one. Step two was mapping this journey out in a logical way. And because we're a more robust technical platform, there's more emails in this series, right? Our entire onboarding series is about 17 or 18 emails long, and if you've if you've signed up for the product, you can attest to this. It's a lengthy series, but the idea there is we can stagger different touch points at different phases in the journey. So as soon as you subscribe, you'll get a welcome email from Tyler, and that is a personal note from the CEO. A lot of that is his own words about why he's jazzed about Beehive. It very much looks and feels like a personal note. I think that's something that I recommend across the board for welcome emails. That first touch point, that first moment of connection with your user, you want to establish connection and provide value, and that's how we've chosen to do it at Beehive. And then the emails after that are a little bit more product led. And so we had identified which features are the highest impact from a conversion perspective, and we were able to optimize against those features. So one of the first product led emails is about the text editor. So we have an entire email about this is the text editor, here's how it works, here are the different features that are most valuable within the editor. And so we've repeated that process then for subsequent emails. We have different cadences between the different emails in the series. That's another area for testing. We have tested different lengths, so 3 days versus 2 days versus 1 day. And right now we're doing 2 days because that's been the best performing test variant, but this is something that you should always be testing over time, and we'll talk about that more as we go on through the presentation. But we have multiple steps in the series based on the actions that we know are going to be the highest intent, the highest signs of converting. The thesis being that if we can get you early on to experience the full value of the product, the odds of you choosing to stick around and experience all those features indefinitely is so much higher. And so that ties into this third point here of setting expectations, making it very clear what all these features are that are available to you on your free trial, and making sure that we can ensure that you're getting the most value from those features early on. So the way we've set up this automated series, 30 days, about 15 emails over those 30 days, as well as different experiences in app on the website. And just making sure that those are all aligned towards that final bullet there of setting expectations and delivering early value. I'm going to stop screen sharing. I'm going to jump into the chat briefly to make sure that there are no questions. Cool. Audio issues seem to be resolved. How do you apply for ads? So one note about the ads, those are only available on our paid plans and not on our trial. The reason for that is it ends up being a bit of a nightmare if you leave your trial, you have money in your wallet, you need to get that money out of your wallet. It's a whole thing. Um, so if you're on a paid plan, ads will be provided to you automatically. Our team provisions ads based on the fit between the advertiser and your content. Renee made a comment of she only does a 5 email welcome series over 11 days. That makes a lot of sense. I think most newsletters, most brands aren't as complicated as our platform is. I think it's complicated in the most positive way. Like we are very feature rich, so there needs to be more education there. Most other brands won't need that. Can I create a welcome sequence that is different depending on the source of the subscriber? Yes, you can. I actually have a great example about that we'll talk through, Roberto. Cool. I know KSD said I am on a paid plan. Can you shoot a note to? I'll find a team member's email that you can drop a note to KSD. Cool. All right. And or alternatively, send me an email. I'm Tony@beehive.com, and I'll get you sorted there. Cool. All right. These are the good questions here. I think a great case study is our. This is our Creator Spotlight newsletter. It's a newsletter that sort of a house publication. Francis on our team runs it entirely. He's a creator himself. This is designed to be a resource for new users on Beehive, and it's also a way for us to sort of educate, build awareness, sort of nurture folks early on. And so someone had asked about branching paths based on the criteria of where they came from. This is one way to do it. And so here we're using UTM source. And so auto signup is just whether someone came directly from, if we sign them up automatically as part of their onboarding process to the Beehive platform, that can either be true or false. If it's false, it means that they found us on their own outside of Beehive. And so that's how we're splitting folks here. And this is very much a drag and drop experience, right? So the send email function here, it was literally, this is a live flow, so I don't want to mess with it too much, but if I wanted to add another email, I would just drag this over and place it wherever I wanted to. Same thing with these different delays, time delay here. All these different options are very much a drag and drop, and so you'll end up with different forking logic branches based on how you've chosen to drag and drop things. Oh, I might not be screen sharing. Oops. Yep, I am not screen sharing. Let me fix that. Sorry about that, guys. I am screen sharing now, and just a quick run through what I was talking about. This is the welcome series for our Creator Spotlight newsletter. Creator Spotlight, like I mentioned, is our house publication about how to develop, how to grow as a creator, run by Francis on our team. Someone had asked about the branching logic of different paths based on UTM source. And so that is what's happening here. And this is all drag and drop. So all we did was drag in a true false branch and set it up such that if UTM source equals auto signup, we send them on one path. If that's false, we put them on this other path. And so you can kind of see what this email looks like here. It's very much like we said, establishing that connection early on. It's very much a personal note from Francis. We set expectations early too. You'll get this every Friday. We also have an interview podcast that he does. What it is, it's an interview with a creator and then a discussion of tactics that creator is using that you can adapt yourself. And there is an encouragement here for folks to reply to this email. This I think this is worth calling out in particular, right? There's several reasons why you want to do this. The first one is, of course, like the sense of building community, the value of having a back and forth open discussion. But from a more technical perspective, from a deliverability perspective, if email clients see that folks are responding to your email, they'll automatically assume that, hey, this is more than just a standard promotion email. We should prioritize this in the main inbox. And so encouraging folks to reply and having that back and forth does send a positive signal. And Francis here has a few prompts that people can use when they reach out. Do you create content? Who are your favorite creators? Just reply and say hello. And so again, it's very much establishing that expertise, letting people know what they're going to get, what cadence they're going to get it on, and encouraging some engagement off the bat. And we have slightly different experiences here based on whether they signed up for Beehive as well, whether they're just interested in the Creator Spotlight platform. Now I'm going to jump back into our slides. But first, I'm looking at the chat here. Do you have any automated welcome series and other series suggestions to better engage with the audience? Yep. All right. So to answer Kay's question, you can start from scratch. We don't have a pre-built automation series for you to use off the bat, just because the cadence you use, the messaging is going to be very different based on what your goals are as a newsletter operator and publisher. And so we don't have a pre-built one for you, but I would recommend setting up a simple, even if it's 2 steps, a welcome email, wait a few days, maybe a follow-up email that has a survey. Like there are very simple ways to do this that are intuitively, natively available in our current experience. Is this automation logic available for every type of subscription? Julia, I'm not entirely sure what you're asking there. If you mean like a paid subscriber versus a free subscriber that's on your list, if you have a paid product, you can easily set up that logic to be, if paid, send them on a different path, serve them a different experience. Intentional says, missed the beginning. Yes, this will be recorded, and we'll pass that out in a few days after the call. But now I am going to screen share again and jump back into our slides. Cool. All right, setting up drip campaigns. We've talked about some of this in our most recent walkthrough of Francis's newsletter, but I'll take us back in there and we can talk a little bit more about what exactly is going on there. So to the point about a simple 2-step flow, that's all this is. I think the second email is also worth calling out. Something that we had mentioned here was nurturing over time. And you can use, as part of that nurture process, you can have this true false logic to check their engagement levels. I think that's a key detail that Francis does really well in his automation that I think a lot of folks can learn from Borrow. So just looking at this false branch here. So they came to Creator Spotlight on their own. After we send this welcome email, the one that we just talked through, what we do is we set up this time delay. Again, that's just a drag and drop. So we took this, we dropped it here, configured it to be 30 days, and that's all configurable right there. So you click those little sliders, wait for 30 days, you're good to go. And then after 30 days, this is sort of where the magic happens, right? And so after 30 days, we check whether they've opened or clicked. We want to understand, are they engaging? Are they sticking around? Are they enjoying the content? Are they effectively an engaged subscriber? If they aren't, if they haven't opened or clicked frequently, we send them down this false branch and we effectively leave them alone until we get to a separate automation that we'll talk about. But if they are an engaged subscriber, if there's somebody that we want to continue to maintain that direct one-to-one relationship over time, we can follow up with this email, which is very much a request for input. And so as we've built out the Creator Spotlight product, there have been discussions, debates internally about like, what direction should this go? Should it be a informal long form conversational sort of product? Should it be direct actionable tips for creators? Should it be more interview focused? Should we lean into the podcast? And something that we've decided to do is ask our audience what's most valuable to them. And this is advice I give all the time, right? I think we all have a sense of what we think our audience wants, but that often doesn't align with what our audience actually wants or needs. And so we offer a built-in survey functionality in Beehive, and I can talk through that briefly. But what's happening here is Francis is sending people a survey that has a few different product-related questions, right? So there's a question about what do you want to hear more of, and he has different options for tactical advice versus interviews with successful creators or more case studies on Beehive newsletters, right? And so this is a great way to, because you know these subscribers are already engaged, they're opening, they're clicking frequently. This is a great way to drill deeper to get more insight, which you can then use to make your product even better, and that fuels growth. It's a virtuous cycle there. So it's a good example of a clever way, a thoughtful way to set up sort of automation. I think segmentation is also key here. And so I will exit this automation. I will go into Francis's segments. So audience segments. And a lot of these are like housekeeping type segments. But for example, he has a segment here for rolling monthly active readers. And so he is setting up a list here of active subscribers with at least one unique open in the last 31 days. This is how he tracks his growth over time. And there are other segments that are less of like a housekeeping type segment and more of a specific specific segment he can use for re-engagement or nurturing, right? So here he has some users. I don't want to share personal information on the screen, but he has users who have in the past they have bounced, right? And so these are users who maybe they, for whatever reason, maybe it was a corporate domain or they've moved email addresses, they no longer work at that company, whatever the case might be, folks have bounced there. So Francis has a segment of people who have bounced. And so what he does with that is he can he can use that segment to trigger a totally separate automation. So he can go here, he can do I'm just gonna call this testing. And we are going to save this automation. And he can create a trigger, add a trigger for a segment. If they enter whatever test segment Francis is talking about, you can use this 9 to 6 bounce segment. If they enter this segment, we can send them an email after the fact saying, hey, looks like you might have missed that first email. If you want to check out the entire archive, here's where you see it, right? It's like that's one example of how you can use those sorts of segment-specific conditions to kick off automations that could be powerful, that could nurture subscribers, that can help you pick up subscribers who you have since become a little bit less active, or it's really a good way to understand and tailor messaging based on subscriber behavior is how I would frame it. So if there's any subscriber behavior that you wanted to filter on or engage based on, it's available to you, whether it's opens or clicks or bounces or really anything. The world's your oyster here. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to jump back into the chat and see what's been going on in there. Renee, so the automations are available on the free trial, but if you choose to stay on the launch plan, you won't have access to all the automation functionality. You will have access to a welcome email, which is like a single email that folks will get when they subscribe. So we want you to have that at least baseline level of one-to-one communication. C24 here says, would love to see you guys go over more on ideas for the referral system. As someone talking about doing a creator contest to increase organic growth. So this is actually something I'm happy to talk about, and it does fit into the concept of automation. The referral program is at its core an automated growth tactic. And a little bit about my background. I was previously at Morning Brew, and something that we did there very well was obviously the referral program. I think a few learnings there that I'll just sprinkle in here. The first is that having the first reward be a virtual prize or a virtual downloadable or a special edition of the newsletter, whatever the case is. At Morning Brew, when I was first there, this was early on when we were about like 25, 30 people, we had something called Light Roast, which was a Sunday edition of the newsletter. And that was only available if you hit, I believe, 3 referrals, right? And so there's like two advantages there. One, if we were to give away like a really cool sweater or a t-shirt or something at 3 referrals, that incentivizes a lot of bad behavior. So folks would want to game the system so that they could get this nice T-shirt or sweater, whatever the case is. With 3 referrals, folks aren't gaming the system because it's a digital digital prize. It's infinitely scalable. It's create once, can go to infinitely as many people as we can get it to. But it's the people who are most aligned with the Morning Brew brand were engaging with the referral program so that they could get that prize. It wasn't incentivizing bad actors who just wanted a sick sweater. It was incentivizing people who wanted to, who genuinely loved the brand. I think that's something I recommend too. Like have your first referral threshold in a lot of cases. And this depends a lot too if you're B2C versus B2B and like what your audience is after. But if you can, I think having a virtual reward for that first threshold is always encouraged. Another key learning from the Morning Brew referral program was the idea that getting people from 0 to 1 referral in some ways is infinitely harder than getting people from 1 to 3. So we did a lot of testing on where we should have that first referral threshold, what sort of downloadable reward is like the most compelling. And I would frame it that way of like this is something that's going to differ for every media brand. So if you're large enough and if you have enough referrals, I'd recommend doing some testing in that direction. Cool. Other thoughts on referral programs broadly. The way Morning Brew did it at the time when it was most successful was it was Light Roast, the Sunday edition of the newsletter, was your first referral prize. Your second referral tier, when I believe it was at 5 referrals, it was stickers. And I think stickers are also a really smart idea of referral reward because there's a built-in virality component. Because people put stickers on things, it's kind of the point of stickers, right? So you have some free marketing, and we were using, I believe, Sticker Mule at the time. Fulfillment was super easy and cheap. I believe it was $1 or $2 for a set of stickers, and so on a per unit basis, it was very cheap to fulfill that reward. It was also not sent as frequently because it was only going to folks who had hit that 5 referral threshold, and it was also giving us some free positive branding, some word of mouth, some coverage on folks' laptops and things like that. So that's how we approached the second tier of that referral program, and third, fourth, fifth tiers. That's where we got into things like T-shirts and mugs and all of the other like iconic brand stuff because those are of course a little bit more expensive to fulfill, a little bit more ripe for fraudsters to try to take advantage of. So that's how I would think about it. So overarching takeaway is how can you align incentives in your referral program so folks don't think that they can game it to get cool stuff early on, and how can you increase the feeling of exclusivity? How can you extract some marketing value from your referral program? If you can, like that's a powerful thing. Allison asks, what are the most common and recommended automations or sequences to set up for a free newsletter? I would say a welcome series, even if it's just one email, but just at least one email where you are collecting information, not collecting information, if you're setting expectations about your audience. I think if you want to go deeper than that, having an email where you have a survey, and this can be sent, say, 30 or 60 days after someone first signs up, you can have that to collect information about what content they like, what they don't like, how they feel about, say, launching a podcast. It's really a way for you to think about different directions to take your business. And then there's a lot of value there. And then an automated series for folks who are disengaged. And so that just moves people through a flow based on their engagement level. And if someone has never opened or clicked after, say, 180 days or so, we'll talk about this more in another example, you can remove them from the series entirely. So those are 3 key ones to think about. But let me jump back into the presentation because we'll cover more. And these are all great questions, so thank you for sending them along. I didn't realize how dry your mouth gets when you give presentations like this. Just lots of talking. Um, Nurturing subscribers. We had talked about some of this in previous slides, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. I think thinking of key examples of how I use this in my day-to-day. This second point here, sending targeted content based on interests, because we, like for example, our ad network is a key part of our business, right? And so we want folks to be getting a lot of value there because it's great for users. It makes them want to stick around if they can actively earn from their newsletter. And ad opportunities, our ad network is a great way to do that. And so if I see that you're on a paid plan, if you've engaged with our ad network, so you've viewed an ad opportunity, for example, but you've never actually sent an ad, I will send you a follow-up email with a few case studies and an invitation to like reach out with any questions, right? And I think that can be repeated, modified for a whole variety of different use cases. Um, like if someone, for example, has clicked on let's say you have a link in the bottom of your newsletter for advertisers to write to you or potential sponsors to write into you. If someone has clicked that link, you can create a segment of everyone who's clicked that link in your newsletter and then use that to trigger an automation, right? So you can have a follow-up email that maybe a day after someone, or maybe a few hours after someone clicks that link, you send them an email, hey, I noticed that you had checked out our advertiser page. Would love to tell you more about it. Here are some key details. Here's our rate card. You can also book time with me here. I think that sort of simple automation based on user action can be really powerful, and it has been powerful for us, which is why I say that. Um, this note here about automated reactivation campaigns for inactive subscribers, I think is super powerful and worth digging into. Um, so the way this works in practice, I don't have a ready one to show to folks, but I'll talk through it and I'll look at questions in the chat. But the way this works is you can set up a segment based on engagement, right? So you have folks who say they've been subscribed for 180 days, they've never opened, and they've never clicked. And you can be more conservative, less conservative. This depends on your sending frequency, your historical levels of engagement. If your newsletter is link heavy, that'll change how often like how often people click. There's a lot to consider there, but let's just use those as like big round numbers, good for like this thought experiment. So you have that segment condition. If you haven't opened or clicked in 180 days, you enter the segment. From there, you can send a re-engagement email. So you can send an email that says, "Hey, I noticed that you haven't been opening or clicking. Why is that? What's going on?" And it could be this first email can be super gentle. It could be "Hey, it seems like you might not be getting a ton of value from the newsletter. Just wanted to check in, make sure everything is going okay. Is there something we can do to make this content more appealing for you?" Or something to that effect. And then at the bottom of that email, in that copy, you can have the note that to protect the overall health of the audience and to make sure that we're not sending people email they don't want. If you don't respond to this email, or if you don't click on this link, you can just have a hyperlink. If you don't click on this link, we're going to remove you from the list. You can resubscribe at any time. And so that gives people a notice that if they don't click on that link, they're going to be removed from the list. Then you can set up a wait until branch. You can wait, say, 7 days. You can then check true, false. Did they click on that link in the previous email that you sent? If that's true, if they have clicked that link, they clearly want to stay on your newsletter. You can exit them from this automation that is targeted towards reactivation because you've already reactivated them. Congratulations. But if they haven't clicked, maybe you send them a second email that says, maybe it's a little bit more stern, saying like, hey, this is your last notice. If you don't click back in, we're going to remove you from the list. You can always rejoin. We've been happy to have you as part of the community. Boom. Simple email. You can have another hyperlink there or a button, however you want to do this. You can have a button and you can track clicks on that button. And so then you can wait another 7 days. You can check to see who has clicked that second email. The people who have clicked that email, congratulations, you've reactivated them. You can remove them from your campaign. If they haven't clicked that button, though, that's where you can consider adding a custom field to their profile saying, this user is an inactive subscriber. You can have an inactive subscriber custom field on their profile, and then you can use that to create a segment of all inactive subscribers, and you can exclude that from future email sends that you do. And so there's two advantages here. One, you're improving your deliverability by not sending to people who don't open or click. It sends a positive signal to email providers that you're removing those people from your list. You're improving your overall engagement rates. The numbers look much better for you, which is good from an advertising perspective as well, an overall list health perspective too. There's that, but it's also the second benefit of you're making sure that people who are on your list are the people who actually want to be there. And this is, of course, more of a challenge as you scale, but it's something you should be thinking about early on too. And I am going to stop screen sharing. I know we talked about a lot there. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing any questions. What would be your recommendation for a niche publication, e.g., on policy topics? I don't think the core recommendation changes, like list health, welcome automations, collecting audience data. Those are all powerful no matter what niche you're in, no matter who your audience is. I would say what might change is the information you ask for. If you're a more B2B publication like policy, for example, maybe you'll ask questions about, do you work for a think tank, or do you work for the federal government, or do you work for a local government? Like the questions that you'll want to know about your audience are a bit different. That's my first thought there. And then the question about re-engagement automations, that would very much look the same because you're looking at high level, how often are people opening, clicking, that sort of thing. So the main thing that would change would be how you collect data and what you ask for. With that, I will jump back into our. Dave says for inactive people who don't open, say 5 emails in a row, why not just unsubscribe them versus making them a segment? So effectively, you're doing the same thing, right? The purpose of your automation is to remove people from your daily emails. What I've seen done before worth investigating is, well, the ultimate value here is you have flexibility. So if you add them to a segment, you can exclude them from most all email sends. But say you have a really exciting product launch coming up, you know that everyone in your audience is going to love this. You can use that segment only for that send, or you can choose to not exclude them from that send, which means that they'll get the newsletter and be able to participate in that promotion. Whereas if you unsubscribe them entirely, they are effectively unreachable anymore because that's what our unsubscribe functionality does. So it's just a little bit more flexibility on creating a segment of inactives, which you use as an exclusion, versus unsubscribing entirely. Roberto says, I have 2 similar newsletters on the same topic, productivity. What would be the best way to offer anyone who subscribes to newsletter 1 the option to subscribe to newsletter 2 and vice versa? I would look into our subscriber preferences feature, Roberto. If you just go to our knowledge base, I think that's beehive.com/help. Um, I'll drop the link in here. It's beehive.com/support, actually. So if you just search for Preference Center or subscriber preferences, that should come up. And with that, I will jump back into our presentation. Cool. Personalization at scale. I think using subscriber names and we talked about subscriber preferences at a high level in that last question, but subscriber names is a very easy one and I think can go a long way. And so we offer merge tags here. And what's happening is basically if you've collected subscriber names in a survey, for example, if you have it stored in a custom field, you can then personalize all your emails with "Good afternoon, Tony," comma, and then get into your content. If you don't have a first name field for a specific user, you can have a fallback. What I often do is, "Hey, name," and if name doesn't exist, there. So it's either "Hey, Tony" or "Hey there." So that's one way to use these sorts of merge tags. Um, Dynamically change content based on behavior. I think this is also very powerful. Like in the example I used earlier of people who've engaged with our ad network, who've run ads, if I'm sending, let's say that your goals as a small local newsletter publisher and a large legacy media company are a bit different. And so if I know that you're publishing on behalf of a media organization, we collect that as part of the onboarding experience. I can change that email to better reflect some of those more enterprise ad sales features you might be more interested in. And so that's an example of how you can incorporate that. And leveraging data to create hyper targeted campaigns. Again, I would point to the idea of like custom fields and advanced segmentation. It's honestly one of the most underutilized features on our platform, I would say, is that you can really track any behavior engagement data that you want to in Beehive and then create segments based on that, which you can then move into different automations. Like something that I've seen work really well is that let's say you have a paid product, let's say you have a community, let's say a paid community, let's say you have a YouTube channel, or let's say you have a separate newsletter on an adjacent topic. And so say that you have a segment that you've built of everyone who's opened 75% of the time, at least 75% of the time, they're super engaged and have clicked at least 20 times in the last month. So your core audience of hyper engaged, always clicking, always wanting to learn more about your stuff, you can put them into an automation that pitches your paid subscription. So you can say, "Hey, I noticed that you love our free content. Why not check out our paid newsletter product, or why not check out our paid community?" Because you know that these folks have already been pre-vetted. It's I think this sort of automation and personalization at scale can be really powerful from a free to paid product conversion point of view. And same with on the other side of like that life cycle, if someone churns off of your paid product, there is you can use data again to create targeted win back campaigns. Let's say someone had churned off of your paid subscription within the last 30 days or within the last year. You can collect that information over time, build a list of people who've churned, and re-message them again at, let's say, around Black Friday, Cyber Monday. You can then let them know, hey, I noticed that you were previously subscribed. You no longer are subscribed to the paid product. Now we've added all these features to it. This is what you're getting that you didn't get before, and it's at a special discount for Black Friday. Like that's another way you can think about using this information to create a powerful free to paid conversion funnel. Automating your newsletter, and this is a little bit more advanced, so it's not going to be a good fit for everyone. But the point we're trying to make here is that we've intentionally built Beehive to be an open platform. I know a lot of our competitors have chosen to like keep all their data siloed. I'm not going to name names here, but do with that what you will. Um, we've chosen to offer an API. It's available on every single plan, and any tool, any platform that has an API integration can be connected to Beehive. Two common ones are Make and Zapier. Like a common use case there is connecting Beehive to your CRM. So if someone, for example, signs up for your newsletter, you can send them into HubSpot. Say you use HubSpot for your CRM, and you can have them as a record in your main CRM if that's what you're building, if you're building that kind of business, right? And so that's just one simple example, but a lot's possible there. Data enrichment tools. I think we talked about data briefly at a high level before, but if you're a B2B business where you're selling ads to specific, let's say your newsletter is about software as a service, your newsletter is about developer tools, and your advertisers only want to target people who work in software engineering at certain companies. You can use third-party data enrichment tools. Apollo.io comes to mind. Um, ZoomInfo comes to mind. They all have APIs. So using our API, you can send subscriber records, have them enriched by one of these third-party data tools, and have them sent back into Beehive. And so there, you can then create segments of, and you can store that data as custom fields. So let's say Apollo.io takes my email, tony@beehive.com, and is able to append Tony works at Beehive. You can store that as a custom field of company name. Beehive has 100 people. You can store that as a custom field for company size, etc. You can send that information back into Beehive, which you can then use for segmentation, and it helps you build a stronger story, a stronger media kit for potential advertisers. Of you can say that my newsletter is full of people like Tony who work at mid-sized tech startups. Like that's a much more compelling pitch for advertisers. And then I will jump into this note right after I look at the chat and answer some more questions. To Greg's question, how do you test welcome emails? You can send yourself a test right from the editor experience. And so you'll have the option to send a test email to any user. If you just put your own email there, you'll get a test of what that email will look like, which you can then preview on different devices. Renee says, where you have merge tags, it tends to get buggy and people get hi first name, which is, well, not ideal. This also happens with non-English content. I think that's where being thoughtful with your fallbacks comes in. And so if we don't have a first name field, we'll fall back to hi there or something more generic. I think that's I think that's like a obviously obvious limitation of merge tags, but I think in most cases, if you have a sound fallback, the benefits outweigh the cons. Can I automate a thank you for reading or clicking in the article? Yes, you can. And I can send more documentation on segments. If you go to our knowledge base and just search for segments, that's the link I shared above, beehive.com/support. You'll see a whole bunch of documentation on segment criteria, how to set those up. This would allow me to give Discord access to specific people who are members, right? Or maybe deliver access to a course only to members. Roberto, that's not a use case I've set up before, but theoretically it sounds like it should be possible. I would look at some of our documentation. If you run into issues, drop a note to our support team. How do you set fallbacks? Yes, that is also in the knowledge base. So very straightforward. Cool. Now I'm going to jump back into our slides. We have just a few more left. Cool. Yes, this note here was about using LLMs for research and content enhancement. I think something that we've seen more of and we advise against is there's a line here, right? I think there's a difference between using AI to improve your content and for research. Like we have AI tools built into Beehive that we encourage people to use to help sharpen their tone or fix typos or grammar or whatever the case might be. But I think there's a difference between doing that and having your content be entirely AI written. And so this goes back to the point of like, what is the point of automation and what is the foundation? The foundation is great content. And what I've seen in every case is that folks who've built newsletters that are entirely based on AI, whether it's curation or AI end-to-end writing, the content isn't great. I think that's sort of a limitation of where AI is, at least at the moment, where it's not really new. It's not really. It's all derivative, right? That's just the function of how these models work, and so you end up with newsletters, especially in say like the AI space. You'll end up with newsletters that are curation focused, covering AI. They all sound, look, feel very similar, and that sort of hurts you as a brand long term. Where if your content is written by AI, there's no unique perspective. How do you compete against the other newsletters who can do the same thing at zero marginal cost, right? There has to be some sort of competitive edge, and that's a word of advice I'll give you around using LLMs for more than research and content enhancement. If you move fear into the LLMs become your writer, like it's a hard, it's difficult to defend that from a competitive perspective. And now we have a few playbooks I discussed earlier, but these are different ways that folks in the Beehive community are using automations that have been really powerful for them. So starting with this first one, our lead magnet offers. So this is something that we actually do as a business, Beehive does as a business, and a few of our biggest newsletters do as a business. One that comes to mind is Tyler Denk, our CEO. He has a newsletter called Big Desk Energy, and one of the ways he grows it is through a lead magnet. And his lead magnet is just I believe it's our Series B pitch deck. And so this is the deck that he sent out to investors to close our Series B fundraising round. And the reason it works so well as a lead magnet is twofold. I think the obvious one is it's really hard to find pitch decks. They're often confidential, especially for brands that have grown as fast as Beehive has. So there's value inherently in what the content is, but it's also really valuable for Tyler's audience because Tyler's audience, keep in mind, his target audience is people who are hustlers building businesses in the startup ecosystem who are looking for actionable advice, strategic wisdom, that sort of thing. And so by acquiring folks with this lead magnet, he's making sure that the people who get on the list are actually going to be engaged with the content, and that's something that you can take like a nugget of knowledge you can take and borrow for your own lead magnets. Just that content audience fit. Is this lead magnet going to attract the people that you want on your list? And so Tyler runs this on paid, so he's advertising, I believe, on Facebook and a few other channels. He has this lead magnet. When someone subscribes, he sends them. I'm not sure if Tyler himself is doing this, but I know other brands are. But after someone subscribes from that lead magnet, he has a Beehive survey built in, and we have a ton of documentation on surveys. They're available on all of our paid plans, and they're a great way to learn more about your subscribers' interests. So in Tyler's case, because he's building a newsletter about startups, he might have a few questions related to that. So do you work at a startup? Have you built a startup in the past? How large is your company? Do you have direct reports? Like these are all questions that once you have enough aggregate data, you can then create a much more bespoke experience. So if you find out that your audience is almost entirely founders who are working in the SaaS space, the kind of content you'd create is very different than what you'd create for middle managers at enterprise tech companies, right? And so that's sort of the value of that's those first two steps in the funnel. And then step three, building a personalized welcome email series, ties into just what we just talked about. If you know your audience is entirely founders in the SaaS space, you can maybe get a little bit more technical in the content. You can maybe offer case studies that speak specifically to what founders are building in other niches. The content is different based on that survey data and based on the audience that you acquired via that lead magnet. I see a couple questions popping off in the chat, so I'm going to jump back in there for a moment. Up a B, I'm not sure the specific issue you're having. I would check out our referral program documentation and drop a line to the support team because that should be, not sure what that error would be. One feature I've noticed Substack is pretty long a podcast. We don't have a podcast paywall feature currently. We do have audio newsletters on our Max plan. That's a little bit different than what you're describing here. What you could do is, if you're on the Max plan, have an audio newsletter that really is just the first few paragraphs of your current newsletter. Have that be available to everyone, and then have the full audio newsletter be available to select subscribers. And that's not quite what we have built out natively at the moment, but I can pass that feedback along to our product team. Yep, Julia. Thank you, everyone who's been jumping in to help answer questions too. And to Renee's point, yep, free users cannot set up paywalls because paid subscriptions are fundamentally a part of our paid plan. Cool. All right, so I'm going to jump back into our slides. Premium upgrades. So this is something I actually talked about earlier. I didn't realize it was also one of our playbooks, but something a lot of folks are doing on the paid side or the paid product side is marketing their paid products to their most engaged audiences. I think open and click rates are some of the best proxies for that. So if you've consistently opened, you've consistently clicked, these are people who are going to be more likely to subscribe to your paid product because they trust you, they like your content that's already been demonstrated. And so in the example here, what this brand was doing was identifying the most engaged audience in a segment and then sending an exclusive offer for a free premium trial. That's in some ways similar to how we run our funnel. I think this could be very different depending on what your paid product looks like. Maybe you have multiple paid offerings. Maybe you have a course plus a paid community plus a paid newsletter. I think how you promote those different products will differ based on the audience signal that you have. If someone, for example, has been engaging in all of your polls, for example, that might indicate that they're more dialed into the community aspect. And so maybe you'd pitch the paid community to that audience. So I would encourage you to be thoughtful about the signals that you're collecting and how you're using them. And then, of course, you can have automated follow-up messages at different cadences. You can have this be at 2 days your first follow-up, at 3 days your second follow-up, and at 7 days a full week between your final follow-up. There's different ways to structure this. I would look into some best practices online. Lots of folks do this differently depending on what their product is, what niche they're in, and the demographics of their audience. But definitely think about how you can be thoughtful with your follow-up touches, add value in those different touch points in different ways. Something that we do to add value in our own automation series is Francis. We just looked at his newsletter, Creator Spotlight. He actually has an in-depth guide to how to a lot. It's basically a masterclass from all of his different interviews and like different tools, tips, tactics that different audiences are using to grow, or different brands are using to grow. And we actually share that directly in one of our early onboarding emails. The idea being that if you're able to see more success early on, you're more likely to want to stick around, to want to upgrade. So that is the idea there. And then list cleaning. We talked about this, and this is the same exact idea. Identifying people based on your whatever your baseline is. You can identify people who are significantly below that baseline in terms of engagement. You can then use those folks in a segment, kick off an engagement series to win them back, right? It could be multiple touch points, as few as 2, maybe you do 3 instead, or 4 if you test that out. But make sure that each touch point offers sort of a different feel, a different add value if you can as well. And then if they remain inactive, remove them from your list. And again, there's different ways to do this. I'd recommend adding a custom field to denote them as inactive. You can then remove them from the majority of your sends to protect your overall deliverability. I'm going to take a moment to jump back into the chat. Cool. And yeah, for anyone who has to jump off, as a reminder, if you joined late, we will be sharing these slides after the call. It'll take us a few days to process the recording, but once we have that. And then we talked about this as well, but using a no-code tool between Beehive and ZoomInfo is what this particular brand is doing. When a new subscriber signs up, they pass that subscriber's email through ZoomInfo using our API integration to append demographic information, like gender in this case is the example. This is a brand that is very much skewed towards women's lifestyle, so like gender is important to them. And they use this enriched data to segment their list and provide the advertisers with the demographic information they need. And again, this is all shared in bulk. It's anonymized. You're not sharing any data about users at like an individual level. It's just a larger story of this is our publication about women's lifestyle, and the majority of readers are women. It's a more cohesive, complete story that's grounded in data. And that's just one example of how you can use that sort of data enrichment. AMA with EJ, AMA with Tony instead today, but we've had a lot of conversation over the course of the call. We have 3 minutes left, but I'm happy to stay over a few minutes if there are specific questions in the chat. Give folks a minute or two to write in, but I think this has been really productive, and I'm glad we were able to keep things roughly within an hour. Going to leave one more call for questions. I'm glad people have found this helpful. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions too about how we approach lifecycle marketing at Beehive, I'm your guy. It's my job. If you have any feedback too about a lot of you folks have probably received many of our early onboarding emails. If you have feedback about how those look and feel too, let me know because I'm happy to make them more impactful for you guys. That's the point. They're supposed to be valuable. Awesome. It seems like there are no more questions and we are right at time. So thank you everyone again for attending today, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Goodbye.